Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title?
Mr. Speaker.
Yes, recognizing the delegate from Calvert County.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have an amendment at the desk. It is amendment number 733422-1.
Amendment number 1.
Move so much be considered the reading of the amendment, Mr. Speaker.
So ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So Maryland's Constitution states that in Article 8, Section 1, the state shall by law establish throughout the state a thorough and efficient system of free public schools. Makes sense, except that we do have quite a few schools that are not thorough and efficient. And those schools would be ranked as one-star schools. And our current system, with the blueprint bill that passed, the real bill passed in 2020 in the dark of the pandemic. So it's been 5 years. 5 years of massive spending and 5 years of this bill having been in effect, and yet we still have entire schools where children do not test proficient in math or reading. 5 years. That's a generation. That's someone who was, what, in 8th grade?
Mr. Speaker, point of order. What is the amendment about?
Recognizing the parliamentarian.
Sure.
Yeah, just want to make sure we know what the amendment's doing.
I know this is a sore subject, Mr. Speaker, and this is a very important subject because these children aren't reading and they can't do math, so they're basically non-functional when they graduate. So this bill, this amendment, the amendment to House Bill 504 would allow the students in the one-star failed schools, and they are failed schools, just those schools, to have the money follow the student. So the student can go to a non-public school, public school, a school of their choice. And further, this particular amendment allows for those children that are identified by the administrators and teachers as being violent and disruptive. It gives the teachers and administrators an option to talk to the parents and allow those students to attend military boarding school. So my alma mater, Lansdowne High School, I think yesterday or the day before, and the speaker's alma mater, for the record, just had a shooting outside the school. I lived right down the street from there. It's where I was raised, born and raised. This is happening all across the state. That's a 16-year-old that did this. I am certain the teachers in the schools that this gentleman attended, including Lansdowne High School and probably Lansdowne Middle School, I am certain that they identified this child many years before and could have saved the child's life by sending the child to military boarding school. But unfortunately, that day's passed. And Lansdowne High School, by the way, is a 2-star school. It's been 2 stars forever. But we have 1-star schools where literally no one is learning, and the blueprint has been in place for 5 years. It's not working for them. It's probably working for others, maybe, but not for them. And it's the same places again and again. Mr. Speaker, over 2/3, 67% of Americans support school choice. And I can tell you, if we had the conversation with those same parents throughout the state of Maryland, if school choice were available to just those children in the failed schools, it would probably be pushing 100%. So the idea that we should continue to do the same thing with the blueprint on those failed schools 5 years later is stupid. It makes no sense. Those children deserve other opportunities. I would also like to say this. The governor of Maryland wrote in his autobiography, The Other Wes Moore, that when he got into trouble, his mother sent him to military boarding school, and he said that it saved his life. I believe that. I believe that. I went to school with many of those individuals in Lansdowne High School who were troubled youth, whose lives would have been saved, who are now dead or incarcerated. And the cycle just continues again and again and again. I don't understand why we aren't taking swift action on those failed schools 5 years after the blueprint passed. There's absolutely no excuse. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Committee Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Body, I would urge you to reject this amendment, and I'll start by saying our state constitution does require an adequate public education for all of our students in the state, and that is precisely why we have the blueprint, so that all of our children, no matter what zip code you live in, can receive a quality education and that we can uplift all of our schools, because there are inequities. There are inequities in our schools, and that is what we don't want. I also want to correct that the blueprint has only been in effect for 3 years, not 5 years, as the gentleman mentioned. So we're coming up on 2026 when we'll have an audit, and we will take a look and see what exactly is working and what's not working. And with my good friend, Chair of Appropriations, our committees will take a look and see if we need to make any changes to the blueprint. I'd also like the body to reject this amendment because I think he had a Freudian slip. The gentleman called his amendment a bill, and it is a bill in the Ways and Means Committee right now. House Bill 1180, we just heard it this week, so it will be vetted by the Education Subcommittee, and they will decide whether or not to take action on the legislation. But to be clear, what this bill does is it diverts further money from our public schools, creating further inequities in our school system, further dividing the children across the state and denying them an equitable opportunity to education. What the bill does is unclear as to whether or not what a violent behavior, what is deemed violent behavior, what is deemed continuous disciplinary behavior that would kick you out of the public school, right? What is not in the bill is due process when that happens. What are the rights of the child? What are the rights of the parent? What is not present in the bill is, do the parents even have a say if the school says this child should go to military school, or does the child just get shipped off to a military school outside of the state, and then we are sending monies outside of a state of Maryland? So there are lots of problems riddled within the legislation. I'm sure the Education Subcommittee Chair and the folks on that committee will take a very close look at that and vet it. And so for those reasons, Mr. Speaker, I urge my colleagues to reject this amendment.
Mr. Speaker.
Delegate from Anne Arundel County.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand in support of this. I know that we have a lot of other parents in this chamber, I being one, and I think we probably all share the same experience when your child is born, especially your first, your whole priorities change. Your whole outlook on life changes. And you say, I will do anything to protect this child. I will do anything to pave a way for the success of this child. At least I hope we all share that. Now I want you to think about something. What if you're a parent, usually a single parent, and you happen to live in a school district where you know there's a one-star school? but you don't have the financial means to get out of that district where you know this child has to go. And that principle of you would do anything for your child is now stripped from you because you know you're going to be forced to send your child to this school. It has a mental effect on a parent when they know that they're setting their child up for failure. It's called learned helplessness. And it will destroy not just the child, but the parent, because they weigh heavily on the parent to know nobody else is passing out of that school. Why don't we give those parents the opportunity? If that school's great, then they'll send their kid there. But in a one-star school, let's give these kids an opportunity. Let's give those parents or that single parent the pride of knowing I did give my child an opportunity for success in education. And that's all this amendment does. We do studies around here all the time. Why don't we look at what happens in other states when they get school choice? Got a 19% greater chance of going to a four-year school when you're given choice. That's what we're arguing for in this other part, what we argued for in this bill earlier, that we want to recruit higher educated teachers. Some of these kids should get this opportunity, and if we don't accept this amendment, we are, once again, destining them to more failure. We talk about AI here. AI is pattern recognition. That's all it is. Data in, pattern recognition. That's why it's so powerful. And if we keep beating down on this same pattern of we're going to send them to failed schools and think it's going to work out, we don't recognize anything. This is an outstanding amendment. I push the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Recognizing the delegate from Baltimore County.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So it hasn't been 3 years. You know, we all look at the blueprint. It's the latest 5-year plan we've got. It's the latest initiative. I remember the year I launched my first political campaign. It was 2013. I sat down with some friends, my brother, his friends, and one of the people at that meal that day was a Baltimore City school teacher. She lamented a lot of the experiences she had. And she said, you know, the thing that bugs me most is we just continue to pass kids through the system, even though they shouldn't be passed. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? How does that work? And she said, you know, I have students that, 9th grade students that don't know their letters and numbers. And we're really forced to just keep those students moving, because if we held them back, it would be deleterious to the students' progress. And I hear the same exact story today. Let me do my math. It was 2013. It was 12-ish years ago. And these kind of problems, I'm sure they existed long before I was ever interested in politics. So it's not 3 years. You know, we talk about the blueprint. Remember when the Russians used to have, comrade, it's the 5-year plan, the blueprint. What will it be in 5 years? There'll be another thing we're working on. The blueprint will have been here for 10 years, and we'll have the same issues. I remember when President Obama talked about issues in schools, and he talked about the discipline issue, and he said, you know, if the outcome disproportionately harms minority students, well, I think that's racist. And I think if the outcomes disproportionately impact minority students, well, I think that's racist. And Mr. Speaker, in Baltimore County, we continue to have less than 50% of all students, K through 12, who could read at a 3rd grade reading level. So I think what we have before us is really an injustice. I think we're sitting here year after year after year without a resolution. I think we're turning a blind eye to some really horrific problems. It's been an entire generation of students that's passed through the system since I was elected, 11 years ago. And I think what the amendment offers is a solution. I just listen to what he's offering. For students in single start schools who really have no path forward, give them an option and let them get out. And what you found around the country is that when they've passed similar legislations, It's embraced by all parts of the state. It's embraced by all different communities, especially the minority communities, because they tend to be the students who are trapped in these systems, which frankly have zero accountability. That's really the bottom line here, is you have a system that just can't get it together. And I think if that's the end result, we should say, you know what, we're not going to, this is the civil rights issue of our day, and I think we should say, we're not going to steal your education, we're going to give you an opportunity at something better, and that's why I'll be supporting the amendment today.
Mr. Speaker.
Recognizing the committee chair.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I want to thank the colleague. We came in together, my colleague who just spoke, for his commitment to minority students and to single mothers. I'm a single mother, and obviously I'm a minority, so shout out to all the single mothers. I'm slightly offended by you saying we're just passing and not doing anything about education, and that flies in the face of everyone that supported this, the blueprint, and it flies in the face of the governor and the legislation. We have been doing everything that we can to support students in this state, and the blueprint is making progress. Fourth grade reading moved from 40th nationwide to 20th. 8th grade reading in Maryland moved from 25th to 21st, and that was just in a matter of 3 years. In the legislation, there is an Academics to Excellence program that you would be removing with this amendment, and that's targeted at the schools that you're talking about, the lower performing schools, where the teachers would have literacy coaches and they will have math coaches. Those are extra hands in the classrooms to help those underperforming schools perform better, do exactly what you're talking about. So supporting this amendment would remove all of those supports for our children in our schools in the state of Maryland. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I would urge the body to resist this amendment.
Delegate from Southern Maryland.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Hey, could the maker of the amendment please rise? I have a quick question.
Yes, sir.
So the committee chairman was just talking about some statewide data there. I was under the impression that your amendment here only applied to one-star schools.
That's correct. My amendment applies to only one-star failed schools, which are schools where children simply aren't learning.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Speaker, on the amendment, there was a Fox 45 news story February 18th dealing with Baltimore City schools and these failed schools that the amendment is directed to. On the National Assessment of Education Progress, known as the National Report Card, Baltimore City came in towards the bottom, the fourth of any large city school in the nation, despite being funded a third more in funding than Orange County, Florida, Miami-Dade County, Florida, which I believe this amendment copies what they're doing in Florida. See, we used to have this term in private business, it's called R&D, research and development. In politics, it's called rip off and duplicate. You duplicate the things that work and do less stuff of the things that don't work. Apparently, Florida, it's doing really, really well there. So well that they're at the top of the scale and we're at the bottom. Now, we were just told by the floor leader that money following the student is a good thing. Why shouldn't money follow the student on this amendment? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker.
Recognizing the majority whip.
Move the previous question.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The previous.
Roll call.
The clerk will call the roll. Has everyone recorded their vote?
Mr. Speaker, to explain my vote.
Recognize the committee chair to explain his vote.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am voting for the motion of previous question so we can move on to the vote on the amendment. So if you want to move on to a vote, you would vote green. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The clerk will take the call. There being 109 votes in the affirmative, the motion to call the previous question has been adopted. So the question before the House is the adoption of the amendment. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Speaker?
Has everyone recorded their vote?
To explain my vote.
Recognizing the delegate from Baltimore County to explain her vote.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand to support this amendment because it is the option for individual students in a one-star school. We cannot wait. These students cannot wait. As a former teacher, a mom, a grandmom, a youth sports coach, these kids need help now. Waiting 3 years to deliver results is not going to help them. So this is important so that every student, regardless of your zip code, has an opportunity to succeed.
Recognizing the delegate from Calvert County to explain his vote.
Thank you, sir. To explain my vote. I've had an opportunity over the years, having been from Baltimore, born and raised, to serve with many people in this legislature from the county, Baltimore County, and the city. And interestingly enough, as each one of them left the legislature to go on to do other things, they all had the same comment to me in private once they left, and that was, failed schools and children stuck in them are so systemic that the only way to fix it is to have the money follow the student and empower the parents and the child to have an opportunity at a better life, to go to another school. And yet here we are doing the same thing again and again. So privately, this conversation occurs, and it's important to bring this conversation into the public, because I can assure you, we will be back here next year, and I will be offering the same amendment, and I'm going to hear the same excuses from the majority party as child after child after child in failed schools is not able to read or write, including when they graduate from high school. That's unacceptable. And so for all those reasons, I'm obviously voting for this amendment, and it escapes me why the majority party won't fix these broken schools and help these poor students. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker.
Recognizing the delegate from the Eastern Shore to explain his vote.
I just can't imagine going to the parent of one of these failed schools and telling them they don't matter. I don't know how you do that, because everything I keep hearing is we're not leaving anyone behind. And this kind of bothers me that we do this sort of thing on one side of ours and then we don't do it on the other. So I'm going to vote for this. Thank you.
The clerk will take the call. There being 97 votes in the negative, the amendment fails. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading.